Hey guys, how's it going? Danconia. Welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup 2020 Countdown Cup North America results. So, earlier on today we took a look at the results that came from the APAC region for the Countdown Cup, our last tournament of this season ahead of the playoffs that'll be taking place not too far away now actually. So, we're going to take a look at the North American results in this one where we see the majority of our teams, all 13 of the other ones, and it's been interesting because we've seen a top 3 develop in North America of Paris Eternal, Philadelphia Fusion and San Francisco Shock. Then you've got the Chasing Pack, and then you've got the pack below them that contains like the Titans and the Houston Outlaws and the Valiant and people like that. And it's been interesting to see how these packs interact with each other during this tournament. So let's go through these fixtures and then we'll take a look at the standings after this tournament has taken effect, because obviously the winners get 3 wins on their record, the runners-up get 2 wins, and the 2 semi-finalists get 1 win as well. So, let's start off with our first match. Friday, August the 7th, we saw Vancouver Titans taking on the Atlanta Reign. This was a 3-0 for the Atlanta Reign. I don't think anyone would have expected any differently. Vancouver Titans came into this off of the back of sweeping the Boston Uprising in the qualification match for this tournament. And Vancouver Titans were the 12th and bottom seed coming into this tournament. We didn't really expect Vancouver Titans to get any further than this, and they didn't. Atlanta Reign looked decent with Thsi on the Genji. We didn't see much Ursa during this tournament, which is slightly worrying when we talk about it in a minute. But Thsi against the Vancouver Titans was fine, alongside Edison. Every single part of the Reign pretty much outdid the Titans. The only bright spark for the Titans was Shockwave, who always looks good. Shockwave is the best, the best player on this Vancouver Titans roster, especially when they can get him on that Echo, which we did see a little bit of. And he looks phenomenal. He also looks very decent on the Genji as well. So there's still a lot of work to do for this Titans squad. We're coming towards the end of the season. I don't expect Vancouver Titans to do much more now. And it'll be a case of waiting to see what this Vancouver Titans squad do at the end of the season. But Atlanta Reign will proceed on, and we will see who they will take on a little bit later on. Next up was Houston Outlaws taking on the Los Angeles Valiant. This was a bit more one-sided than I expected. Los Angeles Valiant got a 3-0 victory over the Houston Outlaws. The good thing for the Valiant is that in the past week or so, Genji is not as played as he was a couple of weeks ago. So you do have the ability to pull off the Ash Tracer that we saw more of during the Summer Showdown. And Valiant love the Ash Tracer. So with Shaq's KSP and KSF allowing to go onto those roles, KSF also bringing out the Genji as well, Valiant have looked pretty strong against this Houston Outlaws side. There is a big difference obviously in that main tank role between Hydration and Dreamer. Dreamer looked like the better option. The Houston Outlaws DPS line didn't look as strong as it has done in recent times either. So yeah, there was a clear difference between these two teams. I thought the Outlaws would be able to put up a bit more of a fight, but it's not what we're going to see from the Outlaws this time around. It is a pity because this is the last time we will see the Houston Outlaws during the regular season. Well, I mean, it's a tournament, but it's a regular season. They're not playing for the next 2 weeks because they have played all of their games. So we won't see the Houston Outlaws again until the playoffs begin. So, yeah. For the Houston Outlaws fans now, it's just a case of sitting and waiting and seeing what the other teams do around them and seeing what seeding they get for those playoffs. But next up, we had the Washington Justice taking on the Dallas Fuel. So this was the interesting match of this round of fixtures, these 4 fixtures actually, because Washington Justice, they've been steadily improving. Dallas Fuel this week have melted. Absolutely melted. They've lost Aero, their head coach, they've lost their assistant coach Tickety, they've lost Decay, they've lost Harry Hook. And it's been in rather ugly circumstances, with Decay being accused of toxicity and Harry Hook doing some very questionable things in DMs on Discords. So it's not been exactly brilliant. Doha is very good friends with Decay, and so we were worried that Doha would have an effect on this. And there were a lot of questions about this Dallas Fuel side, which led a lot of people to believe that Washington Justice would be able to get a victory over this Dallas Fuel side. But I am pleased to say for the Fuel fans that the Fuel did rally around them, and they got a 3-2 victory. It was close. But Dallas Fuel did get the job done in the end, which is great for Dallas Fuel. I think I think a lot of people would have been extremely worried if Dallas completely capitulated against a team like the Washington Justice, which, in all fairness, I was worried that was going to happen as well. So I think this is a great performance from the Dallas Fuel in light of the circumstances. They have only 2 coaches right now. They have an interim head coach. So Dallas Fuel, I mean, it's going to be a tough end to the season. Without a doubt, it's going to be a tough end to the season. But at least we still know that the Dallas Fuel have the quality and the mental mindset to beat the teams they should be beating, like the Washington Justice, even if it was a little bit too close for comfort. But the last match of this round was the Los Angeles Gladiators taking on the Toronto Defiant. This was mega close. Toronto Defiant are looking so good in this meta with agilities allowed to, go on the Genji, a little bit of Junkrat Sim with logics and agilities on the controls, on the control maps. It's looking really, really cool that we're seeing a little bit of Junkrat Sim actually. It's very, very different to watch. But Toronto are really able to put up fights against decent teams with this meta currently that is really, really suiting them. But it does end up as a 3-2 for the Los Angeles Gladiators. It's a case of Gladiators just having that raw power to get past a team like Toronto Defiant. When you look at the likes of Birdring, when you look at Kevster, Mirror has played every single bloomin' role in the past 2 weeks. I've seen him play Zen this weekend. He's played Brig. He's played the Zarya. And he's played the DPS. He's played the Genji. He's played the Junkrat, I believe, as well. It's pretty insane what Mirror's doing right now. He is an ultimate flex player for this Gladiators side. And it's really offering him a very interesting dynamic that no other team in the league is really kind of doing right now. Yeah, you can make an argument for Super playing the Genji and whatever, but I don't think there's another person this season that has played all 3 roles. So yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic that Mirror has at the Gladiators, but they get a 3-2 victory over the Toronto Defiant, and I think they deserve it. But now we move into our quarterfinals, and this is where the big boys come in. So the top 4 seeded teams, this is the San Francisco Shock, the Philadelphia Fusion, the Florida Mayhem, and the Paris Eternal. So the San Francisco Shock would kick us off in these quarterfinals, and they would get the first pick of opponents being that number 1 seed. Of course, they go ahead and pick the bottom seed left in the tournament. Well, actually, no, they weren't the bottom seed left in the tournament, were they? They were the second bottom seed left. This is the Dallas Fuel. So for some reason, the Shock avoided the Gladiators. They didn't want to take on the Gladiators. I can perhaps understand why. And they probably looked at the Dallas Fuel situation and thought they were a bit more of easy picking compared to the Gladiators, who would put up a bit of a fight. This is a 3-0 for the San Francisco Shock. I don't think anyone's too surprised about that. And to be quite honest, even if the problems, that Dallas have had in the past week or so didn't exist, I don't think anyone would have expected anything less than a 3-0 for the San Francisco Shock. They have a lot of quality that the Dallas Fuel just really can't compete with right now. Not to say that the Dallas Fuel didn't put up a fight. They did put up a fight, but the Shock are just another level. And I've said that a lot this season, but they really, really are. And it's no shame for the Dallas Fuel to go out to a team like San Francisco Shock. That's what I will say. The second quarterfinal was the Los Angeles Gladiators taking on the Philadelphia Fusion. Now, this was originally meant to be the Paris Eternal versus Valiant, but the Paris Eternal had some electricity issues, and so they had to have theirs postponed until much later in the day. But before Philadelphia Fusion taking on the Los Angeles Gladiators, Gladiators had a really close match against the Toronto Defiant. Philadelphia Fusion came into this as number 3 seed. So Philadelphia Fusion, I think they're looking very, very good recently. I think they have a little bit more than Paris. I think Paris have kind of not eased off, that's the wrong word, but they're not as powerful as they were in the previous tournament in the Summer Showdown when we saw them take home the crown. But Philadelphia Fusion are incredibly powerful, and they're now starting to use, and this is something that really weirds me out, they're using Ivy over EQO. Now, we all remember EQO's god tier clutch in the Summer Showdown final. And since then, he's kind of not been used, and they've kind of put in Ivy on the Genji. And Ivy is a brilliant Genji. He's doing fantastic. I don't know really what that means for EQO. That's something that's been bugging me over the past couple of weeks. But Los Angeles Gladiators and Philadelphia Fusion, there's a very big skill gap here, and it's quite obvious. It's a 3-0 for the Philadelphia Fusion in the end. And it's kind of a disappointment about these quarterfinals because, spoiler alert, they are quite one-sided. The top 4 in the NA region are quite obviously better than the rest. I think we have to say that right now. And the top 4 meaning the Shock, Eternal, and Fusion, but it also includes the Florida Mayhem. And we will be talking about them right now as we take a look at the Florida Mayhem taking on the Atlanta Reign. This is 4th versus 5th. So this arguably is the closest one here. But it wasn't really close. It was a 3-0 for the Florida Mayhem. Atlanta Reign, they are persisting with Thsi on the Genji or the Symmetra, depending on what he feels like. And I'm not sure whether kind of diving Thsi in at the deep end, since he was so recently signed, is a great idea. I'm wondering where Erster is for the Atlanta Reign right now. Erster Edison is a really good DPS line, and I don't know why the Atlanta Reign are fiddling with it. I think Erster would have been a better pick for the Atlanta Reign than playing Thsi the whole time. We also saw some pretty odd stuff from the Atlanta Reign, especially on Hanamura, where we saw some Symmetra Bastion TP stuff, and we saw a spawn camp on first point. I don't know what was going on with the Atlanta Reign, but some of those calls were very, very iffy, and I don't quite know why they were going down that route. So, yeah, it was a weird look for the Atlanta Reign, and it was kind of disappointing because I thought they could make this match pretty close, if not cause an upset. But a 3-0 for the Mayhem. Mayhem looked good. BQB has been fantastic this weekend. Absolutely fantastic. Yaki also stepped up to the plate, whether it be on the Genji or another pick. And yeah, it's disappointing for the Atlanta Reign. I'm not going to lie, it's disappointing for the Atlanta Reign. But our last quarterfinal was the Paris Eternal taking on the Los Angeles Valiant. 2nd versus 6th seed. And the Valiant, they looked impressive due to their DPS, you know. KSB, KSF, and Shax, whoever be in at the time. They look darn good. No one is arguing that Los Angeles Valiant, they have a really good DPS line. But the Paris Eternal have a DPS line that can match that with Soon, Xi, and Sparkle, quite obviously. But then when you go and start comparing Dreamer and McGravy to Hambin and Bembest, you start to see differences. When you compare Fielder and FD God to Lastro and Rain, you start to see some differences come up. I mean, Fielder and FD God is a really good support duo in the league right now. Fielder was a massive pickup for the Paris Eternal, and you could start seeing big differences between these teams. Paris Eternal, though, it wasn't easy. I think this was definitely the closest of the quarterfinals, and it's testament to Valiant for making it close like that. And because of the wobbly sort of thing we saw from the Atlanta Reign against Florida Mayhem, it does make me wonder whether Valiant might be the 5th best team in this region. It really does make me think. I think the meta is doing well for Valiant right now, especially with KSF stepping up on the Genji. And I think the Valiant are not a dark horse, because I don't think they're that good. But I really do think they could cause some teams some problems in coming weeks and maybe in the playoffs as well. So keep an eye on that Valiant side. They're not too bad, I'm not going to lie. But semi-finals then, it's what we expected. It's the top 4 teams. It is the San Francisco Shock, Florida Mayhem, Philadelphia Fusion, and Paris Eternal. We started off with the Florida Mayhem taking on the San Francisco Shock. So this is a rematch of the May Melee final. And this, in the May Melee final, went 4-2. Florida Mayhem, they have a knack of stepping up against the big teams. I'm not going to lie. This was close. This was close in the early stages. The first 2 maps, Florida win the control map, and they looked darn good doing it, not gonna lie. San Francisco looked a little bit lost. They did look a little bit lost. They didn't seem to want to play the Genji. They had a weird lineup of Striker and Ans, so, you know, they were a little bit all over the place. Then we go to Eichenwald, and Eichenwald is literally a hair's width from being a map win for the Florida Mayhem. And if it's 2-0 at halftime, I think this series goes very, very differently in terms of its result. But that momentum shift there gave momentum back to the San Francisco Shock, and it ends up as a 3-1 win for the San Francisco Shock. It's an unfortunate occurrence for the Florida Mayhem. Things can be decided on a knife's edge, especially at this level of Overwatch. I think if that Eichenwald map goes differently, and it's literally down to 1 pick. That's all it is. If that Icon World map ends up as a win for the Mayhem, then I think we see the Mayhem knock out the Shock here. I'm not gonna lie. Especially as, you know, it would have ended up going to 5 maps anyway, and then we would have seen Control, which I think Mayhem would have been stronger on. So it's unfortunate for the Mayhem, but I think despite the result, it's a great display from the Mayhem. It's the Mayhem stepping up once more, whereas I thought they'd sort of fallen off a little bit. I thought they were starting to get dragged down into the likes of the pack that has the Atlanta Reign and Valiant in it. But no, this demonstrates that the Florida Mayhem are clearly better than those teams. And they're trying to compete with the top 3. Can they compete with the top 3? Well, you need to win when it matters, Mayhem. And to be quite honest, and being brutally honest, this doesn't matter. What matters is the playoffs. And if you get a top 4 seed in NA, which is looking increasingly likely, you're in a great position already. So all you've got to do now is you've got to take down one of those teams. You've got to take down one of the Philadelphia Fusion, Paris Eternal, or San Francisco Shock. And if you can do that, you may well find yourself in the grand finals. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting going into the end of the season. But the next one was the Philadelphia Fusion taking on the Paris Eternal. This was a rematch of the Summer Showdown final. Isn't it fun when we get these rematches? So in the Summer Showdown final, it was a absolute barnstormer, one of the best matches of Overwatch that has ever been played. But Paris Eternal took home the victory during that one. And Philadelphia Fusion were out for some revenge, and they get that revenge with a 3-1 victory over the Paris Eternal. Philadelphia Fusion, I do believe, are a better team than the Paris Eternal right now. I think the Paris Eternal have slipped slightly in recent weeks. I don't think they're as powerful as they were. So I think Philadelphia Fusion are very much worthy of their 3-1 victory over the Eternal. I think Ivy matched Sparkle very, very well. And Sparkle is one of the best in the business at the Genji and the Doom. And Ivy really did match him incredibly. And that was a great show. Also, we haven't seen Carpe. We haven't really seen Carpe. We've seen Hisu. And Hisu's Widow for the Fusion against Paris was really, really good. Really good. Hisu had a really good match against the Paris Eternal. And yeah, it can be fine lines. It can be fine lines. But Philadelphia Fusion definitely looked like the better team than the Paris Eternal this time around. But this is a tennis match between these sorts of teams. I fully would expect Paris Eternal to come back at some point and then get this sort of victory over the Fusion. I think they are two teams that can go at it all the time, and it can go from one to the other. It's going to be really interesting, and I think that could be a rivalry cropping up. It really, really could. But it set up a final between the Philadelphia Fusion and the San Francisco Shock. Two of the best teams in the league right now. Arguably the top 2 in NA. I think, my personal opinion, they are the top 2 in NA. It is close. It is close. But as the match sort of gets into its later stages, you see not the experience is the wrong word, but the coaching of Krusty and I suppose the experience is the right word, the experience of winning things from the San Francisco Shock comes through. It ends up as a 4-2 victory for the San Francisco Shock. They are crowned Countdown Cup champions for NA this year, and that means they have taken home 2 trophies. They've taken home the Countdown Cup, and they've taken home the Melee. And it's interesting, I'm not gonna lie. They're kind of following a similar path to the Shanghai Dragons, who won the Melee, then lost the Summer Showdown, and then won the Countdown Cup. So they're following a similar pattern. You get what I'm getting at here. But Philadelphia Fusion, it's heartbreak, isn't it? It's absolute heartbreak. 2 tournaments in a row, 2 runners-up. It's runners-up to the Paris Eternal in the Summer Showdown and runners-up to the San Francisco Shock in the Countdown Cup. But who knows, Philadelphia? Maybe 3rd time's the charm. You know, just hinting. It's going to be incredibly interesting to see how this all pans out. San Francisco Shock, they looked really good. They kind of grew into it. They struggled at the start of the Mayhem match, but you know, during this final, they looked really, really good. They got rid of the sort of the shakes that they had in that Mayhem match at the start. And again, don't be ashamed of losing to the San Francisco Shock Fusion. Don't be ashamed. But it is a learning curve. It is a learning curve. And I think this sets us up for a fantastic grand finals. I really do. When we looked at last year, when we looked at 2019, we saw Vancouver Titans and the San Francisco Shock. That's what we saw. But I look at this right now, and I look at Shanghai Dragons. I look at San Francisco Shock. I look at Philadelphia Fusion. I look at Paris Eternal. Maybe Florida Mayhem. Maybe Guangzhou Charge. Maybe New York Excelsior. There's teams here. There's different mix-ups of a grand finals that we could see. Ultimately, I think the top 4 teams in the league right now are the Shanghai Dragons, the San Francisco Shock, Philadelphia Fusion, and Paris Eternal. But it's going to be interesting. I think we're in for an incredible playoffs when we get to them. So that is it for this one. Let's take a look at our standings just to round things off. I know this video is getting a little bit long. I don't know what the Overwatch League have done to their standings on their website. It's hideous. Please change it. But we have the Shanghai Dragons still on top. I don't think anyone is going to dethrone the Dragons now. They are going to stay there probably until the end of the season. They only have one more match to play. It is against the London Spitfire next week, I believe. The Philadelphia Fusion are in second. They have played the same amount of games as the Shanghai Dragons. They will not be going any higher. But I believe the San Francisco Shock will probably usurp them with the 3 matches in hand that they have. And they're only 1 match behind them now in terms of wins as well. So I expect our top 2 to be the Dragons and the Shock, which is going to be rather interesting. Eternal are in 4th. Charge are in 5th. The Charge have finished their season. I expect them to drop when Mayhem and Excelsior play some more games. The Atlanta Reign are in 8th, behind the Mayhem, who are 6th, and the Excelsior, who are 7th. The Reign, obviously, in 8th. I don't think they can improve on that with their current look if they keep on with Thsi. One team I think that could improve on their placing right now is the 9th place team, which is the Los Angeles Valiant. They have looked decent recently, and I think their DPS could carry them to an 8th place finish, but I don't expect anything higher than that. I think the top 7 are pretty much locked in right now. Spark up to 10th with those 2 wins on the board, getting to the final of the Countdown Cup. They have 1 more match to play this season, so I don't expect them to be going anywhere too much. Gladiators in 11th, Seoul Dynasty in 12th. Seoul Dynasty, that 12th, is at risk. They have 3 matches coming up against the 15th place London Spitfire. Those matches will determine who will be playing in the qualification match for the playoffs in APAC, whether it will be the Seoul Dynasty versus Chengdu Hunters, or will it be the Spitfire versus the Chengdu Hunters. So those matches are going to be interesting. Fuel remain in 13th place, Defiant in 14th, as I mentioned, Spitfire in 15th, Hunters in 16th, Outlaws in 17th, Titans in 18th, Justice in 19th, and Uprising in 20th. Remember that the Outlaws and Hunters have played all of their games this season, so they cannot gain any more placings than where they are now. All the Hunters have to hope for, and actually Outlaws as well, if Spitfire continue to lose in the way that they are losing, Spitfire will end up below those 2 teams. So they'll be looking out for Spitfire losses coming up, I'm sure. But that is it for this one. Look out for the preview of the week's fixtures coming up in a couple of days on Thursday. Also, there will be 2 Team of the Weeks tomorrow, looking at NA and APAC separately for this Countdown Cup period, which is super duper interesting. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.